the IPO is trading around 131 times sales. And when you compare it to Alphabet, which is trading around 10 times sales, and Nvidia 19 times sales.
Around 40% return.
The largest company in the world, were loss-making company.
And I've found that Musk's companies for decades have just defied gravity. Vastly overvalued.
Goldman Sachs recently forecasted their revenue will become around 474 billion by 2030. That's 100x from today.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Intelligent Wealth Podcast. I'm the host, Tony Byrne, and with me, as usual, are Carl Roberts and Awet Ghirmay. Today, we've got a subject that doesn't really need any introduction. It's SpaceX, whose founder, of course, is Elon Musk, the one and only. So, what can I tell you about SpaceX you don't already know? Well, it was formed in 2002 by, of course, Elon Musk. And the company basically designs, builds and launches rockets and spacecraft, plus a few other things. So its most important business is reusable rockets. They were the pioneer in this. Starlink, which is its satellite internet business. Carl was mentioning before the show, they got something like, did it say 10,000 satellites around the world, giving internet connection. Provides broadband around the world. They've also merged in XAI, which is their AI company. And of course, what gets forgotten about here, they've also merged in X, which used to be known as Twitter, which is obviously a lot smaller than the other businesses. Now, in terms of ownership, this does tick the boxes in that respect. We like there to be visionary founder owners with skin in the game. Well, you can't find more of a visionary founder owner than Elon Musk. And he doesn't just have 10%. He owns 42% of the equity and 79% of the voting rights, which is in some ways really good, but other ways really bad. So that's a brief introduction to SpaceX, which of course had its IPO, its first share flotation last week, and it raised something ridiculous like $70-80 billion. But they only sold 4 to 5% of the shares of the company. So most of the company is still privately owned. But of course, what that means is all the indices, the important indices like the NASDAQ, S&P 500, the FTSE 100, they're all going to have to buy Starlink shares. So that's quite interesting as well. Now, what we thought we'd do is kick off with some quickfire 5 financials from Awet. Over to you, Awet.
All right, thank you, Tony. SpaceX is pretty much one of the most anticipated IPO in the world. I think it was pretty much one of the 7th largest listed company now, and IPO just recently. So, and even when you look at it, the SpaceX, I think is valued like the same valuation as the whole aerospace index. So this is just a recently private floated company and valued as same as the aerospace index. And when we look at the valuation for SpaceX is when they floated recently on Friday, it was trading at around 93 times sales, right, during the IPO. And now it's trading, because the share price has went up significantly since the IPO, is trading around 131 times sales. And when you compare it to Alphabet, which is trading around 10 times sales, and Nvidia 19 times sales. So of course, this is an early company. There's a lot of expectation from SpaceX, but you can just give you a brief understanding how is valued this company. That means the revenue is pretty much, the market is implying 100 years revenue of, based on today's valuation. But the good thing is not everyone agrees. Professor Aswas Damdra, and I think you probably heard of him. He's quite good on valuation. He's called the father of valuation. He valued SpaceX closer to 1.25 or 1.3 trillion. So he thinks the valuation should be between 1.25, between 1.3 trillion, while Morningstar estimate the SpaceX valuation around 780 billion. So, there's a little bit of premium here investors are paying since the IPO. And what we need to understand about SpaceX is this is like a very capital intensive business, right? SpaceX has invested a lot of money, and I think in 2025 they have spent it around 14 billion in capex and 9 billion in research and development, while they're generating around 19 billion in revenue and almost like 5 billion in losses. So it's still a loss making company. SpaceX. While there's a lot of expectation, of course, the company future grows. Goldman Sachs recently forecasted their revenue will become around 474 billion by 2030. That's 100x from today. However, this is like the forecast should be treated carefully because Goldman Sachs is one of the underwriter of this IPO. So overall, I think we have to be cautious. Of course, the company has a good, balance sheet because they have around 224 billion in cash, and recently raised money over 75 billion. So they are well capitalized overall. But overall, when we look at the company, is priced for perfection. And I think most IPOs during the first flotation over time, when we get the accounting and the market will adjust at some point. We just don't know when, but of course, there's a lot of perfection and optimism in their stock price in already.
Thanks, Awet. Very interesting figures you gave us there. I think we're on to the chart part now, which I don't envy, Carl, because there isn't a very long track record of public share price to follow, apart from the last few days. So I don't know how you're going to get out your rabbit out of the hat here. But over to you, Carl. I'm glad it's your session and not mine.
It's probably the shortest chart part I'll do for a while. But yes, it's listed on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol SPCX. So it agreed an IPO price of $135. And at the time of recording, it's had 2 full trading days. So yeah, the agreed IPO price was 135. Currently, at time of recording, after 2 days of trading, the share price is sitting at $192, which is a 43% return over those 2 days of trading. So it's been a very popular IPO. I just thought I'd compare that to a couple of other companies just to see what happens to their IPOs and the same distance in trading. So first of all, looked at Tesla. So Tesla IPO'd back in 2010, and its price was $17 a share. And after 2 days of trading, Tesla's share price went up to $23.83. So interestingly, it's roughly a similar return, around 40% return after the first 2 days of trading, Tesla and SpaceX. So you sort of think, well, is that just all IPOs? Are all IPOs very successful in the first couple of days of trading? So then I thought I'd have a little look at another one, more recent one, and that's Meta, or was called Facebook at the time, because it was known as quite a big technology IPO at the time it came into being. They listed IPO at $38 a share. And after 2 days, their share price actually fell to $34. So they're actually down 10% after the first 2 days trading. It doesn't, just because you IPO, it doesn't automatically mean the share price is going to go up. I mean, you would think there's a strong chance it will, because why would you IPO unless you think it's going to be successful? And you'll find most companies like to IPO when markets are quite a high point or buoyant period. You don't tend to find many IPOs when markets are in a bit of a bear market or crash. But ultimately, I mean, we're only talking a couple of days here, so we can't really read too much into it. But yeah, it's been a successful start for SpaceX.
But do we know how much Tesla share price has risen since? If it was $17 then, how much is it today?
Yeah, they've had a few stock splits since then, so I haven't got
It's hard to work it out.
the actual figure for that. But obviously, they've been very successful.
Yeah, it's gone up a
Even
lot,
just in the last couple of years, you'd probably find a 100% return.
Because I think with Meta, they fell in the first year. I think it was 53%. But if you look at it today, it's up by over 1,000% since the public flotation. So most IPOs, shortly after IPO, they're unsuccessful. Like 80 to 90% do really badly in the early days. But it doesn't mean they'll necessarily do badly longer term. Personally, I think Musk's companies are all vastly overvalued. And I don't share all this sentiment about him being some kind of magician and he's going to dominate the world. He always makes promises about great profits they're going to make, and they never materialize. They lost money for years. The only time they went into profit was with carbon credits, which is a false level of income in my book. It's not real income. And even now, they only make, we worked it out, something like 3% return on their market cap, which is tiny. And I think it's quite illusionary. So I think that a lot of people on this this junk diet called Musk aim or Musk adoration, but I think his companies don't make much money. I think they're overrated. I've been driving Tesla cars myself for the last 9 years. I can tell you personally from my experience, and my wife who's driven 3 new Teslas in that time, the quality is very poor. And I think he might be a pioneer in creating a lot of businesses. And by the way, I'm not anti Musk. I do think he's a genius and he's been very visionary.
Mhm.
But I think that there's a lot of competition, and now BYD, the Chinese company, produce far better cars than Tesla, a fraction of the cost. And I think it's going to go the same way with everything else he touches. He might be the first one there, but the competition is going to be too good. And I don't think I think his companies are not priced for perfection, they're priced for disaster. Now, I don't think Carl's going to agree with me somehow, are you, Carl? What do you think?
Well, I was just going to mention as well, one of the reasons that the share price would have gone up significantly as well is that compared to, say, back in the day of Facebook Meta, is that index funds obviously are a lot more popular nowadays.
Yeah.
As
You have to buy
we're
it.
talking quite a big company, it all automatically needs to be bought by
Yeah.
all these indexes.
True.
Now, a lot of the indexes used to have rules which meant that IPOs didn't automatically always qualify for the indexes.
Yeah.
You had to be trading for a while, to be certain profitable. And a lot of the indexes have actually changed their rules to allow SpaceX to be bought. So, if you're a big fan of index investing, you'll probably find you've ended up buying a bit of SpaceX anyway. So that will help the share price in the short
So
term.
Carl's been very diplomatic here, but I know he totally disagrees with me. And he's, dare I say it, do you mind me dropping you in it here, Carl? You've bought into SpaceX on the flotation, but Awet and I haven't. That says it all. So what do you think about the valuation of Musk's companies, including SpaceX? Do you think they make any sense?
Yeah, I think overall, I think it's quite overvalued and overhyped. I think there is a narrative that believe that in the market, no one has lost money invested with Elon Musk, and is so far has proven everyone wrong. So, yeah, there are a lot of fictitious characteristic here. The market implies a lot of growth in the future, and we will see the accounting. The market will see the result soon because it's publicly listed now, and the market will judge. I think they said, it will be a judgment day soon.
I don't know who came out with this statement, but my understanding of stocks, and most top investors do talk about this,
Mhm.
is that the value of a company, the stock market price, that closely follows the level of earnings. In other words, the level of stated profits in the accounts. Now, it's not an identical relationship. The share price rises 100% over 10 years. It doesn't mean the earnings have risen 100%, but they'll end up in the same direction, pretty much quite close. They're not 100% correlated because, of course, share prices can be quite volatile. And I've found that Musk's companies for decades have just defied gravity, vastly overvalued. I think there's a disaster coming, and its disaster is investing in Musk's companies, particularly SpaceX. I feel that strongly about it, but I know Carl's got the opposite opinion. What about you, Awet? What do you think is going to happen to the share price?
I
Put
personally
your
think
neck on the line. Come on, come out with it.
I personally think the greatest thing about capitalism is, the share price will be, is now floated in the market. I think the market will see the result and punish it. In my view, in the long run, I personally will see correction at some point, because I think the market overall is getting into this irrational exuberance. I think it's getting into the peaks of the market we see. So I do see at some point there'll be a correction. I just don't know when, but I do think there's a lot of excitement. Companies like Anthropic and OpenAI are planning to float. So overall, I do think we are getting to the market where there's too much excitement. There's a lot of fear of missing out. And I think it's the time to be a little bit more cautious and
Apart from his visionary brilliance as a person, Musk, with all these great innovations, I think his greatest skill is fooling the public into believing his stories and investing at vastly overpriced prices to buy the shares. So that bit I do admire him for. It's a great lesson to all of us if we need to raise money. Just tell great stories. Anyway, we better get on to the pros and cons of investing in SpaceX. So what we're going to do is Awet and Carl are going to take it in turns to go over first of all, 5 pros for investing in the company. We're going to kick off with Awet. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, one of the reasons to invest in SpaceX is it's got strong competitive advantage, because SpaceX is one of the first ones that to do a lot of reusable rocket technology that has never done before. Historically, it was the hardest thing to do. And especially space rockets launch business is near monopoly, is almost monopoly, and it controls more than 80% of global, mass orbit since 2023. And it's got more, 99 success rate, and they have around 9,600 satellite, which makes up almost three quarter of the satellite orbit. So other companies are closer to SpaceX in that kind of, space economy. The company has a lot of experience and government contract and satellite license technology and knowledge. So it's very, very difficult to compete with SpaceX. I think they have the first mover advantage. They have done really well of proving a lot of people wrong, doing things which is impossible for a lot of companies to do. And they have done it well. And I think that's why the market is excited. So there are a lot of advantage for the company, and is run by leaders that they actually proven to do things, not just to speak, but they tend to deliver as well.
Okay. Over to you, Carl.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why SpaceX has got the valuation level it has, and why it's really difficult to compare it to your traditional company, and when you look at earnings, is that it's the potential, isn't it, in the company's future. And there is huge market opportunity for SpaceX. So not to say that they'll be able to deliver on all of this, but if they continue, I mean, they're already obviously the dominant space rocket launcher. There's no question about that. Over 50% of the space launches in the last 2 years have been from SpaceX. Multiple contracts with NASA. They really are kind of like now the leader in space. Obviously, their satellite internet, Starlink company, huge potential there, because I think the stat is, isn't it, 20% or around 2 billion people still live in remote areas in the world, and they are no way going to be served internet by the existing providers, because that needs infrastructure on the ground, it needs cables, it needs data centers, and there's just no incentive for those companies to go out into remote areas and do all that. But it's easy just to point a satellite to that area and start offering internet. So 2 billion people still to serve internet. So it's quite a big market opportunity there for Starlink. Whether there's a correlation there that actually do people want internet in remote areas, or is it just a case of once you're more prosperous, you're going to move into a populated area anyway? I don't know. That could be a downside to it. So all that mobile connectivity that's potential in the remote areas. You've also got the AI infrastructure.
Yeah,
that's a massive opportunity, because obviously one of the things Musk wants to do with SpaceX is obviously build data centers actually in space and harness all that free energy from the sun. Incredibly difficult to do, because he's got to work out how to stop the chips getting impacted from radiation. How do you get the bandwidth to send all that kind of power from space back down to Earth? But if it's something he achieves, I mean, it'll be an absolute game changer like nothing else. I think one of the things people underestimate with all of the new AI technology is just how much energy it needs to run. I was speaking to a chap the other day who builds these data centers around the world, and he's just built one recently, I think in Belgium. So the data center, just the one data center that he's built, requires the energy equivalent to 40,000 homes. So that's just one data center in the world. There is that demand. People do need, or the globe does need Musk to be able to pull this off, a data center in space. And like I say, if he does it, the likes of Google, Microsoft, Facebook, they're all going to need to rent that data centers from him, because they haven't got the space capacity to go and send one up. So massive, huge potential, which is why the valuation is where it is.
Okay. The third competitive advantage, the third pro for investing in Starlink.
Yeah, I mean, overall, Starlink provides a lot of, because Starlink is a profitable company, and it provides a good, the subscribers has been growing from 1 million to 10 million now, which is in the last 38 months, and is generating around 11.8 billion in revenue in 2025, and is already profitable.
Awet, sorry to stop you there. You said it's a profitable company. It's lost $3 billion in the last 12 months. How'd you get that? Where'd you get that figure from?
That's part of the Starlink, not SpaceX, part of the SpaceX company. So
Starlink is profitable, yeah.
Yeah. So at the same time as well, SpaceX is renting to like the data center to Anthropic and Google. Both of them are basically paying over 2 billion a month. So they are overall, I think the company has a good recurring income, and currently raised money as well, around 75 billion to, deliver its mission. So I think there are some profitable business here, like Starlink and some of the data center. But at the same time, over time, the company has a good recurring income to be able to deliver its objective, which is there's a lot of conquering Mars and so on, and provide energy, as Carl mentioned. And the company believes as well that this market could be around 28.5 trillion in the long term. So, this is a lot of growth here. The company is forecasting in terms of to do that as well. There's a quite good recurring income, plus the recent raise that they will be able to help them to deliver.
Okay. I think Carl's got something to tell us about Musk himself as another pro for investing in the company.
Yeah. Added to the valuation and why the valuation is where it is there is definitely like a Musk premium on his companies. I think whether you like the guy or not, you just cannot deny his success. The fact he's built not one, but two of the biggest companies the world's ever seen is quite incredible, really, in quite a short space of time. So I think you have got that sort of visionary founder, that, potential genius. And I think with his companies, again, going back to the valuation and why it's difficult to compare it to an old-fashioned company that will rise over time, and its valuation will be based on what its earnings are and earnings growth. Because these companies constantly reinvent themselves, it's difficult to say that, isn't it? Because if its profits and earnings got to a certain level, but then it had all these new potential built in, you can't then track it as in looking at its earnings, because it's a completely different company to what it was, say, 10 years ago. I mean, Tesla's a really good example. It's obviously started off as an electric car company, essentially, but now you could argue that's turning into a robotics energy type company. So now you can't just look at the car company's earnings. You've got to now factor in the reinvention of all the potential of robots coming in. You've got to factor in the potential of driverless taxis. If that is to become mainstream across the globe, now it might not be all Teslas everywhere, but no one's got more driverless data than Elon Musk. So you could argue that side of the business could be huge as well. Yeah, I mean, I think I think you made a statement earlier, Tony. He sells dreams, but I think so far he's always delivered on everything he's done. So yeah, I think you've got that premium to add.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, and the fifth pro for investing in
Yeah,
SpaceX.
I mean, IPO is always a great way to give people the opportunity to participate. So the space economy has always been a great, people want to participate and to know more about it. So the flotation would give, a lot of investors to participate if they believe that market would grow, which is a lot of forecasts has been growing in terms of space travel, space technology. So people will participate. But at the same time, the IPO would give some sort of transparency for investors. We will receive the audited accounting, and we will have to judge based on what we think about the future market. And I think the company as well to participate and raise money. So overall, I think it will be a judgment day. And once, from now on, SpaceX, when they provide information, accounting information, the market will use that information to see, is the valuation 2.5 trillion now currently? Is it fair? If it's not, it will be punished. If it's fair, the market will reward it. So I personally think this is a great opportunity. At the same time, it's a judgment day pretty much for future investors.
I think that's really important, Awet, because I think when you go IPO and go public, you have to provide all your financial data. You're now under the microscope, and because you're one of the biggest companies in the world, and there's so much talk about SpaceX, everyone's analysing it to death. You've got to put your money where your mouth is, haven't you? I think that's a real big positive, that now we can all see what's happening with that company. He's not hiding anymore, is he? He's now put it out into the public domain. And like I say, put his money where his mouth is, and we'll see if he delivers.
Okay, so that's the pros of investing in SpaceX. What we're now going to move on to is the cons, 5 cons. And again, we'll do it in order kicking off with Awet. So what's the number one con or reason not to invest in SpaceX?
I think we already explained this earlier. It's just very expensive valuation. I think we is trading currently 131 times sales. That means the market is paying 131 years worth of sales today at today's price. Just to give you a perspective, that was just quite expensive. Of course, that doesn't mean, based on the forecast that they think is the space economy is going to grow. Of course, the valuation would adjust, but based on today, purely looking at today's valuation, the company is expensive and a lot of perfection is priced into the stock price. And always historically, when you pay a lot of premium, if the company doesn't deliver, it will disappoint a lot of investors. So I personally think it's good to pay the right price. And at some point, the company, in my view, I think this is very expensive valuation. And I personally think at some point the market will realize this expensive valuation and will punish the stock as SpaceX. This is just how I see it. And I don't know when, but I do think there's a lot of excitement and there will be punishment day. I don't know when, but for a company, it's loss making, it's trading at 2.5 trillion. This is pretty much the seventh or even this now even closer, the largest company in the world where loss making company. But the other company, when you compare it to the rest of the industry, a lot of companies are making, billions of profit. So yes, clearly there is a lot of some sort of bubble element to this stock is factored into it. But, I could be wrong and the future will be a good judge.
Okay, over to you, Carl. Another second con for investing in SpaceX.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most obvious ones is obviously it's still heavily loss-making, SpaceX currently, and has huge costs. If you think of the areas it's involved in, it's highly capital intensive. So it's got to spend huge amounts of money on rockets, satellites, research, development, infrastructure. I mean, going to space is not cheap. Although SpaceX actually been the one to bring the cost down significantly, it's still very, very expensive. So, it can't keep losing money at that rate forever. So obviously that's a huge risk if it can't deliver on some of the things it says. Also, I think the fact it's merged in XAI and X into the company does make it more difficult to kind of value as a whole because they're sort of all slightly different businesses. And I know they're kind of join them all up together, but it's hard to read into what's, going to be a positive for the overall business and what's a negative. So, yeah.
Yeah. I heard a rumor, Carl, that Musk is planning to merge Tesla into SpaceX as well. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I see the logic of that when it's obviously a successful share in its own right, isn't it? But I mean, I could definitely see. I mean, you could map it all out and join all these companies together, can't you? Essentially, if you've got all the connectivity and power in space, which you need the rockets for, obviously that's going to provide the data to the electric car. So you can see this as a very joined up. I mean, was this the grand vision all along? You don't know, do you? But you can, although everyone says, how can he be monitoring all these companies? Because he's still got other private companies he runs, doesn't he? One being the boring company, one being the chip he wants to put in brains.
Yep.
But even all of that, you could still see how that all links to one big overall.
And of course, when you think about it, what is Alphabet other than a whole mixture of businesses? It's not just search. So you could argue it's almost a fund, really, isn't it? Musk companies. So anyway, is there a key man risk, Awet? Is this the third con for investing in SpaceX?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the company depend on Elon Musk. I think he has like a significant control on the company direction. And recently what we've seen is he's been distracted with politics and he's got a lot of, as you mentioned, Carl, as well, a lot of company to manage. So he's been distracted doing a lot of, quite, time consuming, very impossible projects. And he has delivered really well. I'm not sure how he's got the time to manage all this company, but you have, key man. I think if Musk, something happened to him, or if there's like the company reputation would suffer completely. Like, especially I think when he was running and was Trump, there was a lot of things that, people were going to Tesla cars and, set fire on the cars and things like that. So there are a lot of distraction. I think Elon Musk pursuing other ventures and so on. So, and people that believe in the company. The reason a lot of investors invest in SpaceX is because they do believe Elon Musk would deliver. And I think if you take away, or he's getting distracted with a lot of distract, or if something happened to him, pretty much the stock price would be completely, destroyed, because investors have it in I think that the whole valuation, the whole dream is just, if you put it into one, is based on Elon Musk. If you have to invest in SpaceX, Tesla, all his ventures is the key person. So I think the key man, there's a big risk here if something happened to him unexpected or so on. So yeah.
So moving on to the fourth con, and it's the same person we're talking about here, Carl, isn't it?
Yeah, I think just going back to Awet's point, the classic example we mentioned a few times is obviously Apple, isn't it? With Steve Jobs, who was that visionary character, similar to Elon Musk, perhaps on a smaller scale. And whilst Apple have continued to be successful after his death, I think you could argue or agree that Tim Cook was never the visionary leader compared to Jobs. He managed the business very successfully, but actually just continued with Jobs' product and just improved it bit by bit. They've never been able to deliver that next innovation since he's gone. And I think, like we've spoken about, because you've got such a Musk premium on the valuation of SpaceX and Tesla, I think you'd see an almighty kind of crash if anything happened to him. And there's also a question leading on to the next point, the fact that because of the dual class share structure, Musk, I think, owns around 80% of the voting rights of SpaceX. He's also CEO of Tesla, owner of X, CEO of XAI, co-founder of Neuralink. So there's a question of what would happen to these shares. If he was to die or something happened to him, like where's all that go? So I think, you would see an issue with those share prices if something happened to Musk. And also, you've really got to believe in him over the long term and him to get every decision right, because no one else is going to be able to control him, essentially, with the way the share structure is at the moment.
Well, he's certainly got a lot of exes and a lot of children who could share it, haven't they?
To add
I
to
don't know
your
what his
point,
estate planning arrangements are. He never asked me to give him any financial planning advice.
To add to your point, Carl, as well, if you think about it, I mean, they only, floated 4 to 5% of the shares outstanding. There are still remaining significant, or more than 95%. And at some point, that will come to the market to float and to sell, because investors have invested early and they want to cash their investment. I think that would come out in the market. We don't know when, but when that comes in, I think there was a lot of, because now I think the reason the price is going up is only like 4 to 5% of the flotation is in the market. The remaining would come in at some point, and I think that would increase the supply. And if the demand is not there, I think they will have a huge impact on the share price.
What do you think of Elon Musk having become the world's first trillionaire? What do we think of that, lads?
It's on paper, isn't it? I think that's one of these things always to get. I mean, when you start talking about billionaires and trillionaires, it's not like they have a bank account with $1 trillion in. It's all just paper based on share prices. So they're never realistically in his life is ever going to be able to touch that wealth, or the complete entire wealth that he's built up. Obviously, the way he'll do it is...
I don't think he'd had time to spend it anyway, because he's always working, isn't he? He works 7 days a week.
You could argue with the obviously the control structure, you could argue that as a positive. Some people will say that actually you can get things done. Part of the problem with a big boardroom, lots of execs, directors, or different shareholders, you're going to constantly have arguments and get stale. Whereas if he's got the vision and he wants to execute something, he can go off and do it. So that could be argued as a positive.
It's an advantage and disadvantage, really, isn't it? So we're on to the last con of investing in SpaceX, and it's over to you, Awet.
Yeah, I think the SpaceX operate in a very competitive environment, and there's a high regulation. Not very competitive, but high regulation. We've seen some space, they blow up at some point, and there's high risk in there. Rocket fail in some places and they blow up. And I think that can create a lot of, disasters for the company. And so I think there's a lot of regulation here, and there is a competition from companies like Amazon and China-backed satellite network and European projects. So SpaceX overall is leading, but at the same time, the space economy is growing, and I think a competition would come, because as the great thing about capitalism is, if there is good market, there is good demand for it, people will just, the people are incentivized to go ahead and raise money and to try to compete. And I can see that, Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos is doing the same thing. And China as well. We don't have to underestimate China. China is working quite a lot in space, and other countries would follow as well. But the main risk is, main one would be the US and China, I think I see here. And the risk going to things that we never done them before, impossible things. There are exogenous, events could happen in Mars, in other places that we don't know. We haven't discovered them in the past. So there are a lot of risk here that, investors face.
I think as well on the space thing though, that is where their moat really is, because although there's competition coming down the track, that competition comes from China and Russia. And are any American companies going to send any of their technology up in a Chinese or Russian rocket? I don't think so. So
Unlikely.
Sort of the competition comes from the geopolitical issues, isn't it? So yeah.
Okay. So I think we know what the result is going to be. We're going to give our usual football score at this stage, which is topical because it's the World Cup. So in other words, would you invest in this company with your own money right now? Well, Carl, I think I can answer that one for you, can't I?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're doing it right now and based on valuation and the stock price. I mean, I would have definitely gone in the IPO, but obviously we did do this podcast before that. So that's already gone now. I probably would say yes, just about now, but definitely if you're a bit on the fence, if there's any sort of fall in the share price, then I would, be a positive.
Okay. And how about you, Awet? Would you invest in SpaceX right now with your own money?
I definitely think it should be on my watch list. I feel like the market is there's a lot of irrational exuberance. There's a lot of excitement. I feel like, at some point that this companies the share price would be a discount. And I think that's probably the better entry point at some point.
Yeah, I feel the same as Awet. I wouldn't buy the shares in SpaceX. But then again, I was wrong about Tesla. I owned Tesla many years ago and the prices just kept going up. So I don't think it means I'm right, but instinctively, I think it's not the company to invest in when it's so vastly overvalued personally. So that makes the score 2-1 to Awet and Tony over Carl on this occasion, Carl.
Win some, you lose some.
So we'll be putting all the links in the show notes, and Awet will provide a company snapshot, one-page company snapshot to help you with your own research into SpaceX. Our next episode is going to be on a company that specializes in memory, and the share price has risen enormously in the last few months, last couple of years. I think, particularly the last 12 months, I think Micron's gone up enormously, which is a bit annoying because we used to own it in our fund and we sold it prematurely, it turns out. Anyway, so if you're listening to this on the Apple podcast, please do leave us a review. It really does help us get more listeners in the future. The usual risk warnings. I know this is the boring bit. Prices may rise or fall. You may not get back the full amount you invested. Please don't accept anything we've stated today as advice. It really isn't. It's just three people with three individual opinions on this company. Share prices are notoriously difficult to forecast, particularly a company of this nature. So just treat it as part of your own research, because as you know, if you took advice from even the best investors in the world, you could still lose money because they are totally different to you. You've got to base your own investments on your own personality, your own attitude to investment risk, your own time scale, and tailor make it to what you know. That's the best thing to do, invest in what you know. And then you'll get pretty good returns, I think, as long as you use common sense, of course. So that's it for today. Really delighted you spent some time listening to us. Hope you think gave you value for money for listening in. And we look forward very much to you joining us on our next episode on Micron, which I'm sure will be very interesting. So thanks very much and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. Please help us spread the word by sharing this podcast with your family and friends. And don't forget to subscribe.